Hey there, my name is Anthony Romano, and this video is going to tell you all about obesogens. So basically, these are chemicals that make you fat, and they're in a lot of the foods that we eat nowadays, and I haven't really seen anybody talk about them. Okay, so I talk about a lot of topics on my page if you're new, especially the ketogenic diet and fasting, but no matter what you like to do, one thing you have to be aware of is obesogens and chemicals like this that are harmful to your health and that also make you fat. So, the health is more important, but still, this is a problem that no one talks about. It's rampant. These things are everywhere, and you have to watch this video to find out how to avoid them. So what are obesogens? Okay, I have a list and a picture of what the obesogens are, like the main ones that are prominent in food choices. Now keep in mind, depending on where you live in the world, the prevalence of each of these obesogens is different, okay? There's certain regulations in certain countries for other ones, but there's still a very good chance that whatever country you're in, especially if you're in, North America, that you're consuming these in some way, shape, or form. Now, the biggest form of obesogen that is most prominent, I guess, are endocrine disruptors. So endocrine disruptors are anything that mess with your endocrine system. So this can also affect your hormone production. The most popular form of people talking about this, because this is very well talked about in health circles, but as far as fitness and nutrition go, you don't really hear about this stuff. You hear more about stuff that's far less important. And the endocrine disruptors like BPA, okay, estrogenic compounds, so phytoestrogens and pesticides, other chemicals that will cause hormonal imbalances are the primary obesogens here, and they are primarily a problem because they disrupt your endocrine system. So the most common way this happens is by essentially acting as estrogen in your body. So I've read a couple books on this. One of them was Estrogeneration, which I've mentioned a couple times, by Dr. Anthony J. And this book goes into how, especially in a lot of healthcare products, care and non-consumable products, there's a lot of these endocrine disruptors. So when it comes to food, the biggest way that you encounter these things are by phytoestrogens, which are plant defense mechanisms that raise your estrogen essentially, and the pesticides, herbicides, and chemicals which make their way into our food. So this can either be from being sprayed directly on food in monocrop situations or by being fed to animals who have consumed these pesticides on the foods they were fed, which does make it into their flesh and does make it into us if you eat them, which is another reason why I always promote, getting products from organic and locally raised sources, okay? Not just because, it's ethical and stuff like that, but because it is better for you and your health. So that is more so an area where regulations will vary depending on where you live. But the biggest ones that everybody talks about, or at least that I've read about, are atrazine, which is something that is essentially highly estrogenic. Okay, this is something that makes its way into animal crops, and it actually causes cows to get fatter, and it causes male frogs, which are reptiles, but still, to turn into female frogs. It literally causes them to start growing eggs. So essentially, atrazine is one that I'm pretty sure is not present in Canadian meat. And I'm in Canada, so I'm a little lucky there. But there still is glyphosate, which is a pesticide, herbicide, which is very common. So before I get to this list of the other ones, I'm explaining the main ones that you'll, hear buzzwords about. Okay, glyphosate is essentially Roundup, is the name for it, is one which literally messes with your collagen matrix, your network of skin, because it's attached to a glycine molecule. And this one is also an endocrine disruptor and has estrogenic properties to it. Glyphosate is sprayed on a lot of foods, which is one of the things that's very hard to avoid, okay? This is not something that you're gonna see in personal care products, but it is something that makes its way into a lot of foods, and you can avoid most of the problems if you simply get higher quality foods. Perhaps I should have addressed an initial claim here. Most people think that there aren't foods that can make you fat. Now, they're technically not foods, they're technically, artificial ingredients that make their way into food, or inherently harmful natural ingredients, But essentially, these are compounds that do make you fat independent of other variables. And this is well documented. There's evidence of cows being injected with this stuff to make them fatter and then yield more meat for, sale, right? That's what we're talking about here. So essentially, when we're talking about how do you avoid this stuff, high quality foods and avoiding processed foods. Now, in my video about cellulite, I've talked about how there's no consensus on whether cellulite is a toxin storage or whether it's from solely misshaped fats. But when we're talking about things that will mess with your body composition, even if they're not technically an obesogen, processed vegetable oils and processed oils from seeds, and they're basically closer to lab chemicals, and their fatty acid structure is unstable. So even though they might not make you fat independent of other variables, when they're combined with other foods, and especially consumed in general, they're going to give you a lot of oxidative stress, and they're physically, one of the theories, at least for cellulite, is that they will physically cause you to store misshaped fats, given the appearance of cellulite. And that's another reason why, one of the arguments for cellulite being a modern problem is that if you look at pictures of people who are, had body fat on them hundreds of years ago, right? A couple hundred years ago, whenever photography was invented, you'll never see somebody with this sort of cellulite dimpling. And that's partially perhaps because of the misshaped fats. It also could be because of toxins, but the leading theories are from things like these obesogens, which are in food nowadays, and from misshaped fats from these unstable fatty acids, right? Things like, margarine, okay? Things that you can leave outside and no animal or fly will even touch them because they're closer to lab chemicals, okay? So avoid processed oils. Those things are basically, there's plenty of research on how they're the number one cause of all inflammatory problems in the body, or most of the ones that we see nowadays, right? Not all of them, but all the ones from modern issues. Okay, so back to this list of obesogens. So essentially, pesticides is one of the ones that, I've mentioned already, okay? And then we have BPA. So BPA, bisphenol A, this is one that people know about because it's in plastics. And I can be a bit overbearing on myself with a lot of my health habits, but there's also other forms of bisphenol, which is what BPA is. There's bisphenol S, there's multiple variations of bisphenol, okay? And this is essentially not only BPA, and a lot of other, products will say, oh, BPA free, but it's not necessarily free from BPS. So anytime you can not drink from plastic is better. I mean, I'm not a zealot about it, but I do try to drink from glass or stainless steel. And whenever I get the chance, I don't think it's the biggest problem in the world, but I know that sustained consumption of BPA, BPS is a problem, and it is an obesogen, and even in things like canned food can have it, but, try to drink out of glasses or stainless steel instead. But my guess is if you're watching a video on obesogens, what you're drinking isn't exactly the worst. But here's actually an argument of why it could be the worst, because of estrogenic compounds that make it into the water supply. So this is also another topic discussed in Estrogeneration, a book I read a while ago. And essentially, even from people using, contraceptive pills and stuff like that, it can make its way into the water cycle, okay? It exits people's urine and it can still end up in the water because it is aquaphobic. Aquaphobic is the term they use, because fatty acid compounds or anything hormonal is essentially a sex hormone that has to be transmitted through fat, okay? It's hydrophobic, meaning that it's essentially functions like an oil when you put one in water. It floats through and is very hard to get rid of from water or liquid that is, pure, okay? So this stuff passes through water and it's essentially very hard to get rid of. So unless you're consuming filtered water, you might want to be a bit cautious, right? I'm not the biggest, I also am not familiar with the world's, variations and practices with tap water, but I know that especially in North America, tap water is not seen to be as the cleanest source of water, and you're better off getting, not from bottled water necessarily, but from a filter, okay? I'll leave a filter in the description too, if I remember to do that in this one. But essentially, that's another way, BPA, BPS, but I personally don't believe that's the biggest one right now. I think the bigger ones are pesticides in foods and the other endocrine disruptors like atrazine. Okay, phthalates. This is another plastic-based one, right? One that's commonly seen in plastic. Parabens, phthalates. It's also seen in fragrances and products, okay? those are actually some of the bigger sources of endocrine disruptors. They're not necessarily obesogens. I believe most of them are. But when I'm talking about food that you're consuming, if something is microwaved in the plastic package, that could be contributing. But here's the thing. When it comes to phthalates and BPA and any sort of the plastic-related, obesogens, I don't think those are necessarily a problem on a practical level. I think it's more so the fact that if you're consuming those, you're getting it from a processed food, right? You're not going to get, any significant amount of phthalates from, high quality meat that's wrapped in plastic, then you take it out, okay? Microwaving something processed in a plastic package is going to cause you more problems than the accompanying, BPA or phthalates or parabens that come with. So essentially, try to avoid the foods that would contain those in the first place. But in general, when we're talking about, do they actually have obesogenic functions? Yes, they do. So I'm not quite sure how much you would need to experience some of those problems that you could run into, but the general idea is you should not be having an overabundance of processed food in the first place anyways. So soy. So soy is another one. Now, a lot of people will either be very polarizing about soy. I'm not a big fan of soy. Around 90%, and that's a conservative estimate, of the world's soy is GMO, meaning genetically modified. So these are crops that are different structurally than what they would have been in nature. And even though there are some that is non-GMO, which is always better, soy lecithin as a emulsifier in certain products that's non-GMO, I mean, I've never experienced any problems with it, and I haven't seen any research that indicates it could be problematic, right? It's such a small amount of soy lecithin as an ingredient in other products, okay? But that's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about soy protein, soy isolate, soy as a main component of a food, soybean oil especially, very common. It's very cheap to produce, and it's used in almost everything. In fact, that might be one of the biggest ones for producing cellulite in that other video I'm talking about. But soy, people joke around saying, oh yeah, it'll give you, man boobs, or like other things like that.
You just did that straight free. What's something that makes your pee-pee smaller? There must be straight macaroni. Let's go.
But soy has been proven in documents, especially from that book, Estrogeneration, but there's a couple studies in there that show soy is one of the most estrogenic compounds in food that we know. And this is why there's also products like soy isoflavones, which are essentially, they're called phytoestrogens. Phytoestrogens are essentially compounds that plants use them as a defense mechanism, because plants want to live just as much as you and I do. And their way of defending themselves, unlike an animal, which would, physically fight or flee, is to discourage animals who are predatory to it from eating it. So the way they do this is they give the animal who eats it a adverse reaction. And the best way for them to do this is to cause some sort of hormonal dysregulation through these phytoestrogens, okay? Phytoestrogens, like I said, are like soy isoflavone as an example, but they're ingredients that will literally jack up your estrogen in a way, varying results for certain people, but they will cause a variety of problems, because even though estrogen isn't necessarily a problem, right? Men and women have it. Essentially, when you consume it or have anything to raise your estrogen, it can cause oxidative stress and inflammation. And overabundance of estrogen is not beneficial for anybody, especially if you're a woman, okay? But the main purpose of estrogen, in at least, a strictly logical scientific context, is estrogen exists to make you gain fat in order to store it as fuel for, childbearing. Okay, so even if you're not a woman, this is still the purpose of estrogen in your body. Okay, so that's another reason why you don't just want to associate estrogen with, oh yeah, it makes women's skin look nice and etc. It does in the context of a healthy female. Okay, it's not necessarily something that you'd want an overabundance of if you're a woman, okay, or a man. So soy, essentially, compared to all other beans, all other plants and agricultural products, is one that has higher amounts of estrogenic properties than anything we've ever seen. The next closest one is, I think, flaxseed, but even then, flaxseed is like far lower, around, I think the number I remember from like reading this a long time ago was like, essentially, soy is probably like a 10 on the scale of foods that have estrogenic properties, and flax would be about a 6 or something if you consume it in high amounts. I'm not too afraid of flax if I have it as an ingredient in other things, but am I going to prefer flax? Am I going to prefer other seeds to flax? Yes. Now, not that I even, consume seeds on a regular basis, but some people like them, okay? Now, the other one I had here, Soy also, again, this is also where the combination of monocropped ingredients come, because you have glyphosate being sprayed on a lot of these giant crops. Don't know if you heard that. That was my stomach, because I've been fasted for like over a day, maybe by a couple hours. Still going smooth though. Okay, that's the keto stuff, the keto and fasting life. So watch my other videos on it. But soy, I'm not gonna get too far into it. I'm not gonna, lose my mind if I have something with a little bit of soy in it. Soybean oil, yes, I don't like the omega-6. It's inflammatory, in addition to the fact that it's estrogenic and probably from GMO-produced soy. But if I see soy lecithin as a binder in certain products, I mean, you're probably getting a micro fraction of a gram, okay? So I'm not too concerned about that type of a thing with products and food, okay? It's more so where soy is a functional component of the food. Now I'm done with that. MSG. Okay, MSG essentially is monosodium glutamate. This is an excitatory neurotoxin. It makes you think that food tastes better than it actually does. And as far as my advice to you on avoiding MSG, it's not so much because it's an obesogen, it's more so because of the mental effect it will have on you. It's going to cause an excessive amount of glutamate to fire in your brain, which is excitatory. And this is going to make you think something is very exciting, okay? And it tricks you into making things like sunflower seeds, which have a shitload of MSG, taste really good. But in reality, they just taste average, and you would only consume them in nature if you were desperate, okay? Or if you just like crunching on stuff, I don't know. Now, MSG is more so a problem on a practical level because it will make you addicted to food, and it's made to give foods addictive tastes, similar to aspartame, okay? But that's not what I'm talking about in this one. Maybe in some ways it can be obesogenic, but more so as a excitatory neurotoxin. Now, other pesticides, fungicides, bactericides, what else we got? Preservative for wood, textiles, and carpets. So these are other things that, again, they're going to be things that come in like Teflon pans, etc. Stuff that the more processed something is, the easier it's going to be to gauge some of these. Let me get into artificial sweeteners, kind of touched on that. Watch my video on artificial sweeteners. Many low-fat foods. I'm actually glad they wrote that here because I was just looking for a basic diagram to explain this. But many low-fat foods often compensate for, this illusion that it's low-fat and going to cause less weight gain by jacking up other variables that will make a food taste very good. So that often means, aspartame, MSG being thrown into these things. And also there are legal ways these products can hide aspartame, MSG, if there's not certain amounts of them, okay? Like modified starch or, yeast extract or spice extract, those things are code word for MSG less than 70%. And this is ultimately why the easiest piece of advice is avoid processed food. But if I'm being precise with you here, because nobody else on YouTube is precise about these things, this is what you have to avoid because it will make you addicted to certain foods and it will ruin a diet. And I'm one of people of the mind that when you see people doing these flexible diets on YouTube and they have a little bit of a food with some of this kryptonite in it, like MSG, aspartame, all these other obesogens in there, these are things that make people hungrier and mess with them on a hormonal level. So when you see people, if you've seen the other fitness stereotypical videos on YouTube, it's somebody doing a shitload of cardio and then they're tired as hell and then they feel so hungry. And I'm personally one of the mind to believe that this is highly related to some of the processed food they squeeze in just to fit their macros. Okay, so that's why, again, keto eliminates a lot of this stuff, and that's why I'm a fan of it, even in sparing amounts for different people, okay, fasting as well. But antibiotics, yes, I don't need to get into too deep of detail for that one, but antibiotics given to animals is a big deal there. Again, simple way to avoid it, go organic, okay? And particularly grass-fed, grass-finished, okay, when it comes to animal products. PCBs found in fish, meat, and dairy, yes. Similar arguments based on everything I've just said about pesticides and phthalates, parabens, okay? If I wasn't clear on any of these, maybe the best way to explain this is, there are ways to still get sort of quote-unquote junk food, even if it's processed. Sorry if my stomach keeps going if you hear that. There are ways to get this sort of junk food or, occasional snack food that doesn't come packaged with obesogens, all right? This is not something you're locked into. You don't have to, throw away all the Twinkies in the world. There's just like Twinkie substitutes, okay? And I think there's even a Pop-Tart substitute I've seen lately. I think it's actually keto friendly too, but I haven't looked into it. There's things like this. Okay, I know I probably scared you away with like the keto friendly Pop-Tart, but there are even, junk foods with real sugar in them, but they don't have any of these other, toxic ingredients. Okay, it's simple. Even if you're not doing, a strict diet or trying to be more, natural sourced ingredients, you can get the organic apples, the organic fruits, if we're talking about real food, things that I know some people who actually get reactions when they eat peaches, and I personally believe it's from the glyphosate in the peaches sprayed on top, because when they eat them without the skin, when they eat them in a can, they don't have the reaction. Now granted, they might be getting BPA from the can, but still, it's probably not as problematic as glyphosate. Okay, so essentially, when I'm talking about practicality elements here, even if you're going to get junk food, just vet the back of the label. That's one thing I preach on my page, sophisticated fitness, okay? Look at the back of something. Actually, let me see if I still got this here. Where the hell is my... Oh, here we go. So I literally made a video on these Tic Tacs the other day, okay? Because I went to a breakfast meeting for my job, and, I looked at the back, and this doesn't have obesogens in it as far as I can see. But essentially, rice starch maybe, who knows? It might be code for excitatory neurotoxins, but I doubt it. Anyways, I made a video on this stuff because even if you vet the back of the label, something as simple as mints can have ingredients that can be problematic. The ingredients that are problematic in here are other ingredients that are meant to make you mentally addicted to food, like high fructose corn syrup. But essentially, there's not even any obesogens technically in here, but every food is something you have to be conscious of. Oh yeah, one more thing I forgot to is artificial dyes. Okay, this is red 40, yellow number 5, right? These things are thrown into every colorful, vibrant little drink or snack, and for some reason they're in a lot of supplements, they're in a lot of powders, even just like trying to make a capsule look cool by making it yellow, or like protein powder being a slight off shade of red velvet, will have these things. So as far as supplements goes, avoid this shit like the plague. These are very chemically similar to estrogen, and they should by no means be approved by the FDA in any way. You can look this up. There's a high amount of estrogenic properties to these things. They are chemically near identical to estrogen. So, that's another thing I try to avoid. And whenever I'm posting supplements and things like this, or roasting supplements, you can bet your ass I'm looking out for this stuff, because I don't tolerate any of that. And nothing you'll see me endorse or anything thrown back here will have these things in them. And they certainly won't have artificial dyes, but if they have, less favorable sweeteners and stuff, I would, disclose that. But you gotta vet even the non-medicinal ingredients, even the non-nutritional ingredients of a package of something, of some product, before you consume it. Even if it doesn't have the obesogens, which most of them probably do, you still have to be conscious, and don't just look at the macros, okay? Don't just look at the calories and macros, look at the fine print. Okay, and then look at my website, romanoketo.com, and then look at the subscribe button. Actually, reverse that order. Look at the subscribe button first after you've just finished looking at the like button, okay? And then clicking it too. Don't just look at it. So that's it. Leave me some comments, okay? I tried to make this, pretty informative on obesogens. I haven't seen anybody talk about this stuff, and this is stuff I think about on a daily basis when I'm looking at foods I'm buying. It's only been a 20-minute video. Sorry if I have a voice crack. Foods I'm buying, foods I'm eating, no matter where I go. And if I'm going to a place like a restaurant, essentially, you're not going to get food that's cooked in plastic unless it's serving you plastic in certain ways. So there's other ways to mitigate this. But if you're interested in other ways to avoid these things, go to my consulting on my website, because even though my website's romanoketo.com, I try to help as many people as I can of all different lifestyles and, eating preferences. So that's it. Like this video, subscribe, and share this with a friend, okay? That's it. Peace.